Welcome to the Shed of Shred with Fred! Where Fred teaches you how to shred! And teaches you how to shred! Yeah. Metal! This is a metal string. Okay. So, now, you might be wondering, well, what was that supposed to mean? Well, what was the lesson in that? But I'm trying to teach you about how we here at No Humor is Good Humor try to find ways to shoehorn in the topic of a lesson, but also having to try to make it funny because we have like a channel where we base our stuff around comedy. So that was what that was for. I hope you were amused, because if not, I will die a little bit inside. I'm Isaac Ward. This is a video where we're talking about a video we made on this channel called Betty by Bo, a vampire love story. And I'm talking about some parts that I kind of made whenever we made that song. And, if you think anything you see here or whatever, if you find it interesting, you can go and check out the video, which should be in the description. As well as it's going to be, I think, at the end of this video as an end screen. So you should be able to find it there and check out these sounds in that video. I also want to say that whenever I was making these sounds, wherever we were making this song, we use certain kinds of approaches that I don't necessarily always use, but I did in the case of this video. And I won't be always talking about the theory of this stuff that much. Mostly what I'm trying to do is try to illustrate how, we came across sort of designing this stuff, how I came across designing these notes from a compositional standpoint rather than me being really breaking down the theory or anything like that. And if you don't like the theory, or if you think any of the words or anything like that's wrong, or you don't like it or whatever, you could, use the, you sort of look at shapes and stuff and try to think of how you could use that, and maybe something could be useful, Anyway, even though you're not, caring about the theory necessarily. In this particular lesson, I'm hoping to try to illustrate how I kind of relate guitar playing to other instruments, because I mainly play guitar, and that's typically a guitar with a 12-fret system where each has a half step between the frets. So that's like a half step. It's a way of dividing the octave into 12 equidistant sections. And so the tuning for this particular guitar, which is I think of as a standard thing, but there are other tunings and stuff like that. But this is the one I'm using, and this is what I relate from when we're translating this into other instruments and using that kind of thing. The tuning is lowest string is E, and the next one is A, and the next one is D rather, sorry, and then G, and then B, and oh, what's next? It's another E. And so that's the kind of the thing I'm used to. And it's probably a thing that a lot of you probably are also used to, so you also might relate to some things I'm going to be saying here. So the mandolin. Now, okay, I want to be clear. Some of these might have not been in perfect 440 tuning right before this, so there might be a little bit of discrepancy between the particular instruments here. But if they were more in tune, they would probably be more similar for those of you out there who could maybe detect those things. This is supposedly a little flat. I actually think I really took the guitar. It sounded kind of okay, so I'm not really sure how sharp or flat the whole thing is, but it sounds close enough for what we're doing here at least. Anyway, so this is the mandolin that I used for the song, and it's tuned in double courses. So that means say each string has another string paired with it at the same tuning. So it's like a note, and there's a little bit of weirdness as far as the tuning, but hey, yeah, that's okay. But the tuning is G on the lowest note, D on the next one, A on the next string set, and then the last string set's E. This is a metal string. Here's the banjo, and this I think has what's considered, I might be mistaken in this, but open G tuning, or it might just be the kind of kind of standard tuning for like a 5-string banjo. But you'll also notice that there is a string missing, and it's actually a 4-string banjo. and also you might notice that this is not in tune at all, because I'm just going to ignore that note, and I'm also going to ignore the missing string because of what I did to kind of relate to the guitar. Kind of matters more about these particular strings that are more in tune with, you know, the guitar stuff. And it's going to come up more later. The lowest string here is D. The next string is G, and then the highest string here is B, not banjo, but the string is B. This is Mandolin 1. This is played over 2 measures, each with 4 beats in them. And the first 2 beats of the first measure is a G major chord. The third beat is a F major chord, and the fourth is a D minor, and the downbeat of the next measure is a C major chord, which informs a little bit of the way I design the notes and stuff. And so doing that slowly now. Okay, so essentially what's going on there is I'm sort of doing this kind of like, it's kind of like, because like I said before, the strings on this are sort of like the reverse of the like the lower 4 strings of the guitar. Maybe like a 4-string of a typical, like a 4-string bass, maybe, depending on the tuning, of course. But you know, where it's the reverse kind of thing. And so it's like an idea of like taking something like a chord from this. I kind of like look at it like kind of like this, but like the reverse shape. See? But like the opposite of that, because it's like the opposite shape. But like this, it's like the reverse series of strings here. They're in the opposite order of like that of the mandolin. So if you have an idea of like what the chords are, if you have like bass chords or 4 strings chords, like, or maybe a full chord layer, this is, I think it's kind of like, might be considered a caged chord for like a G major chord, which is not super in tune, but you know, you see the shape. And then the lower part here is where I get the information for like how I shape my chord for the mandolin thing. I mean, you can get, you know, other mandolin chord shapes and stuff, but if you have those 4 notes, you can kind of do the reverse shapes and make your shapes like this. Like this is the reverse of what that was on the lowest 4 strings. And that's like a G chord. See? But there are other ways of, you know, doing chords and stuff that you may not normally do on like a, you know, guitar or a bass or whatever. But for this, I'm basing it kind of on shapes from guitar. And so in this case, what I'm doing is I am moving that shape a half step up to like the G major. That's like G major. And I'm going from the half step below that and doing a slide. The metal string. And then I'm doing 2 articulations with my pick. And then I'm doing it again. And then after that, I go up here. And there is a kind of a symmetrical kind of pattern, something kind of convenient in a way, because essentially what you do is keep the finger shape the same until that last note, from one string to the next. And essentially what I'm doing there is I'm doing another chromatic kind of approach, another approach of like a half step, so like only like 1 fret to the next. And that's what that was before. 1 fret motion. And this is similar to that, but different notes and not chords. And I'm also doubling the note before the chromatic, and it's also not a slide. It's articulating everything, so it's. And the notes here are, it's G sharp to A, and then here is C sharp, and then it goes to D, and it lands on the C. And so the way that kind of works with the chords is that you have a chromatic approach to A over the the F major chord, and it's like the third of A, third of the F major chord. So it's part of it's a part of that chord. That note is, and so I go from beneath it to that note, and I do that again, but this time it's over the D minor, and then I hit the D, which is like the root of that chord, and then I hit C major, and then I C. So on the downbeat there. C, so that lands on C, and that's kind of how it fits with the chords. If you like that lick, please go and check out if you want to go and find out any of that lick or these licks or anything like that, please go and check out our Betty by Bo video, which will be the first thing linked in the description, and there's going to be also a video at the end of this video with an end screen that you can check out if you want to hear this in context.
L string.
This is Mandolin Lick 2. This one happens over 2 measures of 4 beats. The first 2 beats of the first measure are G major. The third beat of that measure is F major. The fourth beat is D minor. And then the next measure is 3 beats of F major and 1 beat of D minor. And that's it for this. This one, I'm going to play it slowly first, I guess, is... Okay, so this one is groupings of 6 notes. So like six tuplets, or like it could be like thought of as like 2 like really fast triplets, 1 2 3 1 2 3 groupings of like that kind of pattern, all on one string, and the pattern just keeps on repeating. But then like the notes change throughout, and the first shape, actually, the shape that kind of inspired this, and I actually kind of thought I might be using the shape throughout more of it, but then I ended up sort of changing that, deciding to try to change it more with the chords, but was a kind of a diminished pattern shape. It's like a chord, it's like a diminished chord of sorts. 3 note per string pattern. It was kind of inspired a bit by Sean Lane, and I might try to link a video. I don't know if I will or won't.
L string.
And the shifting to something where maybe he might be using that, and he might be using it differently than I am, but I don't know, maybe he uses it the same way I am too, and I just don't know about it. But as far as I know, I did something a little different with it. But whatever. And so, but whenever he does it, it's actually on guitar, and so it's a little easier on this because it's a smaller instrument, so you can actually make the stretch a little easier. So if you want to try that out, and you've had trouble maybe doing a guitar or whatever, you could maybe try doing it on this or something. Also, if you want to do it on guitar, you also might find it easier to do it higher up, because that would mean the frets would be closer together, and so the shape would be smaller. Just experiment some with that. Also, as part of the theme of kind of how these things relate, if you can kind of like play it on like one string, play a pattern on one string, you could probably find a way, as long as you can make the stretch and stuff, to play it on like other instruments like guitar or other instruments like banjo, because of the fretting, how they have like 12 strings, they like the 12 frets and stuff like that, and how they've been, how the tuning is like similar. So you can still then play those patterns somewhere. Like if you play something on one string, you might find that it also works. You probably will find it also could work on this. Maybe the note won't be exactly the same. If you do that, you might need to try to move on the different frets and see if you can find them out. But yeah, so if you ever want to mess around with that, you can try that out, seeing how your single string licks might work for other instruments. So I think what I did here was I also was doing something kind of similar to what I did with the other Mandolin lick, where I had this chromatic approach. But here I was doing it kind of like where I had this first beat of G major, and I was doing it's actually C, E flat, I think, G flat, that's like a diminished pattern, but that's not G major, so what is it? I mean, technically that was kind of similar to what happened here, where I was approaching the chord on the second beat. I keep the same shape, right? But then I land on B, D, and F natural. Now B and D are notes of the G major chord, and F natural is it's just adding like a flat 7, which to my way of thinking, and for the particular sounds I was trying to use in this piece, it's not very weird sounding. It's just like a dominant 7. And so it's kind of a interesting thing because it's sort of like I have the non-chord notes, and then land on the chord notes, right? So all over one G major chord. And then after that, I think what happened was it's like an F major chord, and then also from there you go. So what I did here was I kind of had a pattern where I had one thing for the F major chord, which comes back later, and then one thing for the D minor, which also comes back, but then the last time when the D minor happens again, it changes a little, but I'll get to that in a moment. So back again, add this chord here, add the shape here. So it was going from a C diminished kind of shape to B. And then the F major chord happens, and I keep these fingers here. The same fingers up here. Stay the same. And then this moves up a half step. Right? So now you have a different number of frets. The frets here are still the same, but then you have like 2 frets technically in between those. Kind of like one space in between 2 fingers. And 2 spaces in between these fingers. Is that still another way of thinking about that? And the notes there for this F major chord are C, D, and F. Now, so C and F are chord tones. So D is not necessarily a chord tone. It could be thought of as something like a natural 6 or something. But again, it's not that weird, but you also could kind of think of it as some sort of note in between the other like chord tones. Some sort of passing motion. Anyway, it just repeats the one time. And then the next chord is a D minor chord. Now here, this finger stays the same place. The top one does. And it goes to a chromatic kind of thing. And there the fingering actually changes a little. But it's still a 3-note pattern. And I go half steps. From C to C sharp to D natural, back down. Over a D minor chord. So it's essentially like it could be thought of as like going from a dissonant kind of note up to the note and back down to a dissonant note before anticipation kind of happens to the next chord, which is C major, which is going to be F major, and C is part of that chord. So in a way that could be thought of that way. So you also could think of it as like a chromatic passing between like the minor 7, which is also not that weird, I think, and for what we're going for here, or what I think I'm going for. So, you know, you could think of it these different ways, but essentially what I'm doing there is passing between like C and D. And then the F chord comes back. And there I go back to the F shape that I did before. It's the same. And it happens 3 times. Oh. And then the last D minor I do. So what happens there is I basically do the same thing as I did before. Except I stop on the D. And then don't continue on from there. I just stop on the D. So the pattern there doesn't keep going. It just stops there. It's like halfway. So, and then that makes it land on the D minor chord. And so it's like I said, it's the same kind of like logic, except this time it literally just kind of stops and stays on that note of the D minor chord instead of moving away from it again. It's me from the future. Full discretion. The second mandolin lick in the recorded version of this was pieced together a little bit because I was struggling to play it a little at the time. So yeah, and I had to work it up a little for this video here. Time for lick 3, number 3. It's not mandolin lick 3. It's banjo lick 1. Lick 3. It actually just has 1 measure it goes in. It's 4 beats. It's all F major. But the next chord it lands on after that is a downbeat of G major, which is actually when the second mandolin lick starts. And so I was trying to kind of like figure out a way to kind of fill the spaces in between these chords, or in between those licks, and trying to figure out like what should I do with this chord. And you know, I was trying to mess around with these ideas, and eventually it became this. I'm gonna do it slow. So essentially, there are these sort of tap shapes. Each one of these is a major shape pattern, and of course there's a little slide of this. There's a little sliding and pulling off at the end. And so whenever I was first kind of thinking about this, I was sort of just I was trying to like think about what to do like with this F major chord. And I was like sitting in our garage, I think, and I was just sort of like messing around with this banjo. And I was actually kind of doing something a bit like this. Right? And I was sort of going just across the strings, because that's kind of an interesting symmetrical kind of thing to do. Kind of it's not too hard to do. Well, it's hard, you have to tap and stuff, and it's like stretching and stuff. But, it's like, it's a little easier to kind of like stay in one space if you're doing something like that. Sometimes it can be. And I was messing around in part with these shapes because of like I was trying to kind of like think of different kind of things I could do with kind of a shape that I think I'm not gonna say like everybody. I'm not gonna say like no, I ever did this, but I was I think I kind of got the idea for this kind of thing from like Guthrie Govan. And I'm probably going to also link a video for that to kind of give you an idea of kind of where this shape comes from. Even though it's a little different because he kind of did it more like this in a minor form. But I think he may have also done a major version as well. So he also usually does it with like a 7 at the bottom. Or something like that. Yeah. All string. Anyway. But yeah. So I was messing around with that shape, changing it more into like a major shape. It's going across the strings. Like I was just doing that basically. And then I was like, well, I don't really, I'm mostly a guitar player, and so I was just like, well, I don't really know what these notes are. What are the notes? I was like, well, I tuned it and stuff. So what are these notes I'm working on here? And what I found I had was a B flat. The first one I had was an F major chord, and so that's kind of cool because of that the chord is actually an F major chord that I'm playing along with. So this kind of happened to work out. Like the first chord, this is literally F major, just F major, B flat major, but then the next one, D major. It's kind of weird. D major, right? Not necessarily even like if you know what I mean, it might not be like a similar kind of key or anything because it's a little different. But these series of notes are like F major shape, D flat major, D major, and then this here is the fifth of that, D F sharp A, and then it slides up to B. And so I was thinking about that. I was like, well, A to B could kind of be like a little anticipation to like a G major chord, which is like literally the next chord that the next one kind of like starts on, next beat starts on. It's where the mandolin kind of begins. And so I thought that would be an interesting sort of thing to do. And I thought it would be fine for what I was doing because, it could be like an anticipation. It could be kind of like right before the G major chord happens. That I kind of go there. But there's like a D major chord here. It's a little weird, but maybe that's okay. But then I was like, okay, well, what are these? Actually, I was also thinking to myself, like, what are the kind of like relationships between these notes? Because I was just kind of thinking about like in a fun way, maybe. I thought maybe it'd be fun to try to kind of think about this some because, how can I find a way to connect these? Is kind of the question I was asking myself in terms of more like a theoretical sense, I guess. And so I was trying to think about that. I had like this is okay. It goes A to B and stuff. But I was also trying to go like, well, how can I connect these things? And so I was kind of thinking about it like, well, F major and B flat are kind of F major is like a dominant to like B flat. It can be thought of that way, like 5 to 1, which is a kind of a pretty common shape, or kind of not shape rather, a common progression. And so I just thought I would think of it like that way. How do I kind of get more of that to happen in terms of how to connect these things? And so I had that B flat or F major B flat. So like 5 to 1. It's like it could be thought of as a secondary dominant, but it could also just be thought of as a dominant, I guess. But then I was like, well, I have a D major chord here, and this is like B flat. So what I do that, how I like connect that? And I was thinking about it, and I ended up going like, well, I could have an A major chord here because D major is like that there, and then A major could be like the dominant to that, right? Like a secondary dominant sort of thing. So what I did was F major, B flat, A major to D major. And so it kind of like connects because of like the sort of the fifth relationship in a way. But then it's like, well, how does the... And I also thought like the B flat could also work because it's kind of like a tritone substitution for a secondary dominant to A, which would be like an E thing. A E major would be like a secondary dominant, but it's like a B flat major. So it's kind of like a tritone sub and a secondary dominant, but it's without the tritone. There's no flat 7 or anything. So it's kind of like, I don't know if they wouldn't look at it that way, but you can also just think of it as like these kinds of shapes. Like chromatic motions to the B, to the A, to the D. So again, that's a F major, B flat major, A major, D major, up to the B. So that goes to the G chord. And it kind of fits because of that. You don't have to, I just kind of thought it'd be fun to try that. And also in the sense of like trying to connect things from one instrument to the other is that one thing I can connect that to, I'm going to say guitar, to that, to the banjo based on the tuning and stuff, is like this, these particular notes of strings are D, G, and B, and those note patterns are also on the guitar. Kind of right here, in the middle, or right here with the, there. So I can actually play that here too. Yeah, it's close enough. Okay. If you found any of this useful or helpful in any way, or if your interest has been piqued, then please check the video that this is a source from. It's a Betty by Bo, a vampire love story, and it's going to be in the description below, and it's also going to be at the end as an end screen. So either way, please go over there and check it out. Thank you.